Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Entrepreneurship to the Point. I'm Sean Tienison, and I'll be your host this afternoon. And during this COVID period, Entrepreneurship to the Point has been hosting various webinars to unpack what is needed or what information entrepreneurs are needing during this time. Entrepreneurship to the Point has been around for the past 7 years, and we've been able to really respond to the crisis by making sure that we inform, equip, and inspire entrepreneurs with the webinars that we're hosting. Please do check out our YouTube channel. It's Entrepreneurship to the Point, and click on the subscribe button. This webinar will also be recorded onto YouTube, so you will be able to share and like it afterwards. On Twitter, we at E to the Point. And on all other social media channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, it's Entrepreneurship to the Point. This afternoon, I'm joined by 2 guests from the Gray Philanthropy ecosystem that will be unpacking what the Gray philanthropy ecosystem has been able to respond in terms of COVID-19. The various programs is focused on assisting and providing assistance to entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. And on the line with today, I've got Anthony Farr and Zipo Zikakane that's joined us. And I'm going to give an opportunity for them to just introduce themselves as we unpack their response to COVID-19. Please also use the chat function below. Let us know where you're dialing in from, what your business is about, and we will also be fielding any questions that you might have during this time. So please feel free to use the chat function below. Thank you, guys. Zipo, over to you and Anthony to just do a quick introduction.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll let Anthony go first.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be with your community, and amazing the work that you've done over these few weeks. My name is Anthony Farr. My current role is the Chief Executive of the Allan and Gill Gray Philanthropy in Africa. I trained as an accountant, but then became far more excited in entrepreneurship over the years, and so have been with various elements of the Gray Philanthropy, including the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation for a number of years now, more than a decade, and more recently now with the Allan and Gill Gray Philanthropy.
Awesome. I think we've got quite a few Allan Gray fellows on the line as well. So great for the fellows to join us as well. Zipo, over to you. It's nice having you on the other side, not asking me questions or anyone else, allowing yourself to be asked questions this time. So.
Yes, absolutely. It's exciting being on the other side also, given that I always see you on the other side if I'm moderating a session. So my name is Zipo Zikakane, and it's a great pleasure to be with everyone today, especially on such an important topic, one of national significance. And also looking at it from the Allan Gray ecosystem perspective, really excited to be sharing with people what we've been up to. So from my side, my involvement is, so I'm one of the non-executive directors on the E-Squared side, which we'll talk about, the one that has funding available also for entrepreneurs. Myself and my background, so I'm a serial entrepreneur at heart. Since I can remember, it's something that I've always done, even to this day, I still am. Some people might also remember me. I spent years writing for the Sunday Times as a business columnist, where I was really challenging people to think differently about what it takes to really be successful in the South African ecosystem. I'm also just passionate about, how do we help all of us be globally relevant? And as we go through the conversation, I think what's top of mind for me is let's make sure that, we do our best to help our country and really get on top of this. So that's brief about me and my background, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So, Allan, the Allan Gray philanthropy ecosystem is quite huge. There's quite a number of projects within the ecosystem. Anthony, can you maybe just give our viewers a bit of a unpacking of the ecosystem and what actually consists of the various programs?
Sure. So essentially, the Gray philanthropy ecosystem is really one of the pillars of the legacy of Mr. Gray. And so in terms of the philanthropic side in South Africa, this initiated about 15 years ago with the launch of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation. And really this was the culmination of Allan's vision that ultimately his business success could translate into impact far more broadly than just the impact of the business itself, which would be significant in its own right. And so the Allan Gilbert Foundation over the last few years has been attempting to create this exceptional pipeline of responsible entrepreneurs, understanding that that entrepreneurs are the pioneers, the agents of change that will bring about the economic development that we need, the employment that we need, and that if we can back some of the highest potential individuals coming out of the schooling and university system and create a pathway for them to be entrepreneurially successful, we can really make a significant economic impact. But in order to do that, the Allan Gilbert Foundation has been supported by a kind of a cluster of other organizations. So firstly, the E Squared initiative that we're talking about now is one that will provide the funding for these Allan Gray Fellows. We realize that as much as building their human capacity and capital, we need access to the financial capital. And so E Squared was set up by Allan as well to create an opportunity for fellows to access that financial capital. And then on the other side, the other entity is the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation Endowment, which was created by the sale of shares of Allan Gray, and the proceeds of those shares were then donated to the endowment as a pool of capital that would underpin this whole system of philanthropy to create a powerful community of entrepreneurs. And over time, that endowment has been involved in a number of different educational and other initiatives addressing issues of literacy and teacher development and other areas. And then to kind of draw this complicated story together, in recent years, just about 2 or 3 years ago, Allan and his wife Gill decided to with the agreement of the entire family, to donate their controlling share of the businesses that they had initiated, both the asset managers Allan Gray and Orbis globally. They decided to donate that controlling share to philanthropy and created the Allan and Gill Gray Philanthropy. So that's where the other name comes from. And so now we have this, and it's working towards the same objectives in terms of the power of the entrepreneurial spirit to be at the forefront of economic development and addressing issues of inequality and unemployment. But now, because it's effectively a global philanthropy, it has a much larger geographic scope to what it's doing. And so in particular in our context, it's looking at work across Africa, starting initially in East Africa. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the Gray philanthropy ecosystem in our part of the world.
I think, Anthony, very much consistent in its view of supporting entrepreneurship and supporting social entrepreneurs within the work that it's been doing over the past couple of years, eh?
Absolutely. And also, if I can add to that, I think just consistently so, right? I think, emphasizing to what Anthony was saying now is the proof is in the pudding. And I think really seeing these great examples of, young individuals who've actually been empowered to be social entrepreneurs and the impacts that they're having, not just in South Africa, but globally. I think it really speaks to the consistency and the commitment, right? To seeing through the results over time.
Awesome. Anthony, if we need to, can we unpack some of the more directed efforts, specifically responding to the COVID crisis? So I think that one of the key things that we've seen that's been consistent is that especially organizations like yourselves that have been doing good work within the context of South Africa and across the borders have been able to really step up during this time, because we've looked and we've seen that the impact is just so much greater than what we need to, that it's not just the norm. We can't just do the normal things anymore. What has been the response, specifically looking from a COVID perspective?
So as you note, I mean, the extent of this pandemic is so pervasive. It touches every last corner of the economy, of society. And so, what we have tried to do in our response to the COVID pandemic is to try and at least have some balance in the response. And so, in the ordinary course of our philanthropic work, we would be very much focused, as we've just heard, on the economic impact of the pandemic, and certainly a large proportion of the funding is going towards the economic impact of the pandemic. But I suppose in respect of the extent, the vast extent of the impact of this pandemic, we realized that we had to be a little bit out of character in this particular context, and also acknowledge the humanitarian impact of this pandemic, and not be ignorant of that impact as well as the economic impact. And so our response tries to balance across both of those paradigms. And then within those two responses, there's a reality that in the first instance, there's been, as we've mentioned, this extraordinary response of South Africans across all different sectors to respond with creativity, with innovation, to the nature of the pandemic. And I suppose we wanted to acknowledge those responses, and to support those responses, and to give them further momentum as a significant component of how we wanted to respond. And then finally, we also realized that as an ecosystem, within our own system, we have certain capacity and certain experience that could be, in a sense, applied or repurposed towards the immediate realities of the COVID pandemic. And so that's led us to our response, and to kind of take you through that just in broad terms. So on the welfare or humanitarian side, supporting existing capacity that's been created, and as part of almost our national duty, we've allocated 50 million rand to the Solidarity Fund, with particular interest in the food security element of the work that Solidarity Fund is doing. Then on the economic side, we felt that one of the best structures that had been created already at great speed, and created an amazing platform just to give more support and momentum to, was the South African Future Trust. And you've engaged with them at some length already yes, on this platform, so you'll know much about them. So we've contributed a further 50 million rand to the South African Future Trust. Awesome. And so that's on the economic side. And then in terms of our more strategic responses, on the welfare side, we realized that through our work in education and other areas, we work with a number of academics that have a lot to offer in response to the pandemic. And so under the leadership of an individual from Stellenbosch University, Nick Spohr, we have initiated something called the Cram Survey, which is the Cram is the Corona Rapid Mobile Survey. And what this is it's the only nationally representative survey that is happening in this country at the moment, to understand in a dynamic way what are the implications of COVID in terms of income and employment, in terms of social welfare, and in terms of health and COVID, in those three areas. How this Cram Survey is set up is that it's nationally representative, but it's also a panel study. So in other words, there will be the same people interviewed over different interviews in different waves over a period of 6 months. The first are being interviewed at the moment, and then on a monthly basis, those same individuals who are nationally representative will be surveyed. And so that will give us very dynamic information to understand, as the government pulls different policy levers, we'll be able to see what the impact of those are on income, on employment, on all of those other measures in a nationally representative way. And so it will be very powerful information on effectively almost a monthly, but in normal survey terms, a real-time type basis. And the presidency's on the steering committee of the survey. There will be briefings to the premiers just to keep them kind of up to date on those implications. And then the final piece of work of the response is this Innovation and Response Fund that's been driven by E Squared, that we're going to speak about at length this afternoon.
Anthony, just in terms of the survey, where are people able to access the results as they continue rolling out the survey?
Sure. So the website is Cram Survey, CRAM survey.org, and all the information will be released there as it becomes available. And already it has a powerful overview of what it's trying to do and how it's doing it.
Okay, awesome. So just for the listeners, we'll put the details in the chat. That's the cramsurvey.org. Please also note that the recording of this webinar is available on our YouTube channel. So please do go and view other videos that we've done prior to this, like the South African Future Trust that Anthony referred to. It's available on our YouTube channel at Entrepreneurship to the Point. Click on subscribe, and please do engage in the chat function as well. So Anthony, just in terms of these various response that you guys have put in place, I think what stands out for me is the ability to focus around collaborating in the response of COVID. You continue the good work that you're doing, but you've also identified key players within the field, like the Solidarity Fund, South African Future Trust, and even with the collaboration with Stellenbosch on the survey. Why did you guys feel it was important to collaborate during this time versus trying to push through your own initiatives?
I think the main point was just the extent of the crisis. And so one of the key elements in terms of responding to a crisis is speed of response, and to really to try and respond as quickly as possible, so that you can, as much as possible, reduce the extent of the inevitable pain that's going to be caused by the pandemic. And so in terms of that speed of response, the best and fastest way to respond is to give more momentum to existing capacity, existing platforms that are already established, rather than trying to repeat or duplicate or try and do our own thing. So that's, I think, both the combination of the extent of the pandemic, so no one organization can have all the answers, and therefore a collaborative effort is almost inevitable given the size of the challenge. And then secondly, wanting to be able to respond as fast as possible by harnessing existing capacity and initiatives. That was the best way for us to do that.
Awesome. I think also it's so great to be joined by so many of the fellows on the call as well. I wouldn't personally do a shout out to one of the fellows or fellow companies, Cape Bio, that's recently been in the news and doing some amazing work on putting together a rapid testing kit. I know that they're also being supported during this time through E2 and the Allan Gray-Orbis Foundation. So definitely really great to hear that the work that you've invested in over the years is reaping a positive impact during a crisis that's unprecedented globally. And I'm sure that the work that Cape Bio is doing will also definitely have a global impact. So we're looking forward to, I'm personally engaging with them as well. So we're looking forward to having them potentially on a webinar and unpacking their journey. Sipho, if you unpack your journey just as a non-exec at E2 and the response of E2, but also your own personal journey. I've always known you as someone that is an African optimist around the fact that as Africa, we continue to be able to really do great things, and we can do great things as Africans. One of the key factors is that this pandemic is going to have a huge impact on the continent. So I'd love to chat about that a bit later, but maybe just let's get into the E2 Innovation and Response Fund and really what is envisaged for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll definitely give you more insights, especially on the fund and how it's going to work. But I wanted to also start with echoing the shout out that you just gave. I think we're very proud of the Cape Bio team. I also sit on the investment committee of E2. So it was really great, to be able to see them come up with the innovation so quickly. I mean, we approved a funding round for them at the beginning of May, and just look at how fast they've been able to move. And also being impressed that they're taking the spirit of collaboration. I mean, they're working with the CSIR, they're working with the Department of Science and Innovation, et cetera, et cetera. So we are watching, and they're also inspiring others, right? This is what's beautiful about it. So hopefully the applications that are coming through for the fund can actually also be inspired by the progress that has been made. There's a couple of sort of areas that the funding is focusing on, right? Particularly, I mean, it's across the spectrum if you look at the impacts of COVID. But if I can just focus, there's the part about, prevention. So looking at everything, whether it's, your face masks, your gloves, anything that's in that space, the business qualifies, right? And also detection, right? So anything around, can we actually get better with the testing? Can we understand the magnitude of the disease much better? And then there's also the care side, anything that is needed in the system, whether it's your patient beds, whether it's your health professional tools, PPE, and then even going beyond and looking at support. So whether it's food solutions, safety, etc. So we're looking across the board, and we're particularly focusing on businesses that have been around for more than, basically a period of more than 12 months, particularly on the response side, right? So we cut it into two. So there's your innovation side, which is basically a new innovation, less than 12 months, go ahead, what is the tech-driven solution? And then also for more than 12 months, then we're looking at the response solutions. Is it an essential product? Is it a service that's fighting the program? So we've tried to make it quite broad and quite open as much as possible, because the issue is quite significant, and we need to get focused quickly so that we can get to the outcomes and the results. And South African businesses are eligible for this. So any registered entity, please go ahead. And it can also be commercial or nonprofit. So we're not restricted in that regard. We've tried as much as possible to be open, so that we can include as many potential businesses as possible. The other thing I wanted to add is that it's quite important, and you mentioned that I'm an African optimist. So when I see this, it's something that gets me very passionate. But we need to see commitment to manufacture locally as much as possible, and obviously where it is realistic, of course, because ultimately, as you're seeing, the impacts of the crisis is that it's made a lot of the call it the national, all different nations all over the world really look at themselves and say, so what can we do? And we really affirming that spirit of supporting local as much as possible.
So maybe just to summarize again for the listeners, is that the E-Squared Innovation and Response Fund is open to all businesses, South African businesses that have been operating for 12 months. We've divided it into 4 categories in terms of the types of innovation and support services that these businesses would bring to the table. It's both social enterprises or commercial ventures focused on prevention, detection, care, and support as it relates to COVID. How do people apply for the fund?
Yes. And before I continue also about how to apply, so just also new innovations, less than 12 months, we're also looking at that, right? So it's quite important. The website, there's a simple form that you can fill, and it asks for the information that's needed. So it's esquared.org.za. So it's e2.org.za. And if you get on the page, you'll be able to see there's a COVID announcement, and then you can click on that and get all the information that you need. And also there's an email if there's any technical glitches or issues. It's e2irfund@esquared.org.za. So using that channel, people will be able to apply. And also the applications are opened. It actually launched last Friday, as it was announced in April, launched last Friday. And then it's closing at midnight on Monday. So I'm expecting all the entrepreneurs that are listening to be working hard to make sure that on the 18th of May at midnight, not 1 minute after, the applications actually have gone through.
And so is it a loan? Is it a grant? What type of instruments are you using in terms of the fund?
Yeah, so we actually are across the board. And also what's important is that what we're pushing for is a quick turnaround time. So we actually put quite a bit of capacity. So to be able to make sure that the funding is available for the people who apply. And we're getting a lot of help from across the board. And we're also pushing to make sure that there's an answer by the 5th of June, so that people get feedback and they can act quickly, given the relevance of this issue.
Maybe just to clarify, one of the questions that we have in the chat is just unpacking a little bit more around the investment. Is it debt funding? Is it equity funding? Is it grant? Have you guys been able to split up the blendedness of the fund, or would that be based on the adjudication of the investment committee?
So I think Anthony wanted to add there, so I'll just give him a chance.
Yeah. So the kind of the stand, I mean, the default product will be an interest-free convertible loan over a 5-year period, particularly matching some of the existing products like Chikuma and others that have been on the market. So it will be a convertible loan, interest-free for the first year at least. But I think that we are looking to be flexible with the product relative to the business. If it's more on the social enterprise side, we'll probably be kind of channeling it through to the endowment and other parts of the system to obviously the product there would be a grant as opposed to a financial instrument.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Just for everyone's focus area as well. So in terms of the application link, we've got it on the chat. So please do to click through on the link. What's the size of the fund? Have you guys made any specific announcements in terms of what the size of the fund is or the size of the awards that will be going out?
Yeah, so on this particular one, just specifically on the debt side, right, the 20 million has been put to be available immediately. But as Anthony was mentioning, there's funding actually across the spectrum available in all kinds of, if you look at the 180 million commitment, there's all kinds of different options that are available. So the eSCAD one is particularly focusing on, you know, looking at these investments, directly getting funding, obviously in a few weeks. But then there's literally across the spectrum. It just depends on the kind of solution or the products that you are designing and which funding source could be available, because the grant alternatives are also available, as he'd mentioned also previously.
So you said that the application process is quite simplistic. I mean, one of the key feedbacks that we've been getting from entrepreneurs is that a lot of the relief funds out there are quite complex in terms of what they require through the application. What is an entrepreneur expecting when they need to complete the application? What do they need to have in place and ready to put?
Absolutely. And I'll help with that. And also, we've tried as much as possible to explain a lot of the information online. I think it's important for people to also understand that the volume of applications is quite high for any platform, right? You know, even beyond this ecosystem. So what I would like to do instead is, I think, give advice in terms of what can you do to make sure that your application is positioned to increase, I guess, chances of being processed, of being successful. And I think, you know, a couple of things is being quite concise and also just being clear. Particularly, you know, what is your business response, right? What is it exactly that it's hitting? Who is benefiting? Just really being direct on those things, and also how the benefits will be, like literally going to even if it's at a unit level, as much as possible. It will make a big difference. And Anthony did say that, you know, in terms of the funding, there is quite a bit of discretion that's left to the investment committee. And we're working with a lot of experts on this, regulatory-wise, from the scientific backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. But it is preferable that, you know, it's funds that are not less than 500K in terms of the applications that people are bringing through. And then also being clear when people are responding, is it an innovation, you know, the newer options, or is it directly a response, leveraging maybe something that's already in place? And then it would help, so for those who are existing businesses, being able to prove an existing ability of being able to run quickly, because this needs speed. So you need to be able to show somehow that you can ramp up quickly. But, you know, the point about the volume of applications, I wouldn't use that as anything to discourage people, but I'm being honest in terms of position yourself so that your chances of success are actually increasing when you do apply it through the ecosystem.
So great advice there from Zipo in terms of being able to position yourself. Please note that the webinar recording will be available on our YouTube channel, Entrepreneurship to the Point, so you can revisit those points. But key things that's standing out is make sure that you are concise in your value proposition, be clear, explain who will benefit and how they will benefit. Also position your application, whether it's an innovation or whether it's in response to the crisis. And remember those key 4 areas as well. It's prevention, it's prevention, it's care, it's support, and detection are the key 4 areas that the fund is focused on. And also note that the applications do close on the 18th of May, that's Monday at midnight. So try and get your applications in. A question from Boyana is, will products be given access to markets for our initiatives? So if you are providing a product innovation, are you guys going to be providing any assistance in terms of access to markets as well?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So already we give quite a bit of support already in the eSquared model. We actually do give quite a bit of support to our fellows. So then similarly, where relevant, we should be able to support, you know, the entrepreneurs that make it through the process.
Awesome. Also note that all information or queries can be sent to e2irfund@esquared.org.za. Do we, Anthony and Zippo, have we done enough as a country in response to the plight of the entrepreneur out there? What else can we be doing? Open question.
Yeah, I mean, this is a once in a century phenomena that's hit us, and so I think it's impossible for us to think that we might have done enough. I think it's really just we've got to just keep pushing and keep thinking and finding other sources of resource. But I think the challenge is, I think often the first response is to think that the resources in terms of financial resource. But I think in a situation like this, we really have to go back to the core and the root of entrepreneurial ability and understanding, and finding new pathways and finding new opportunities, because so much has been taken away by this pandemic, there are still they might be harder, they might be smaller, but there are still other opportunities that are waiting to be explored. And that's where we've got to just keep pushing people to really kind of find that inner resilience, and that's made them an entrepreneur in the first place. And we've really just got to seed that and encourage that and support that to the maximum extent.
Awesome. We lost you there a little bit, Anthony, but Zippo?
Yes, and then on my side, I think just to add to that, going back to your point that you mentioned earlier, I'm very much known of being an African optimist, and my message is always consistent. I think a lot of people have obviously seen me in different stages when I give the talks, but I'm always saying, the responsibility rests on the individual, right? I think for me, there's a lot of efforts that's being taken at a national level, great collaborations are happening, but for us to move with anything, it's rests with the individual. So what I would like to see more of is, and it's there, but we need to keep pushing with the momentum, is, really entrepreneurs out there, small businesses basically saying, look, this is what I'm going to try. This is what I'm going to do. This is me taking individual responsibility, because the small acts that we all take where we sit, if you actually combine them, they can really have a significant impact, and not feeling defeated and saying, but who am I? I can only solve one part, or I'm too small. Anything that's big and that's great today, it really started with, an individual taking action. So that's what I would like to see more. And, I love the spirit of what I'm seeing in South Africa nationally, and also across the board in terms of collaborations. And I believe with all of us, running our businesses, we need to be able to say, this is me, this is my role, in order to be able to see results.
So you were speaking about not being too small, but we've got a question here from Kateko, and she refers to the fact that a lot of the relief funds that's been put out, although they're for small businesses, are more for your more bigger structured small business, where there's a lot of smaller guys, micro businesses, that are not being catered for during this time. You said that, ideally the ask for the fund should be 500K upwards. Where should smaller businesses, or what's the advice for smaller businesses that don't qualify for these relief funds? That's subsistence businesses that really has had a huge impact because they're not able to operate. Government's response was that they did put a spaza shop fund together, but there's almost a missing middle, if I have to call it that, of businesses that are not big enough, but also not small enough to take those opportunities on. They stuck in the middle. Yeah. What about those?
Yeah, and I'll share some of my own views on that. I think, the one, especially particularly with E-Squared, I mean, it's still at the discretion of the investment committee. So what's happening is that if someone does have, even if it's small size, if you're confident about it and you put together your proposal accordingly, put it through. Don't give up just based on the fact that, there's a request that it needs to be above a certain amount. But then the other side is that, Anthony mentioned a really good example about the value of collaboration. And I've seen it not just in the ecosystem, but with our ecosystem interacting with other ecosystems. The impact has been significant. So I'll also encourage some of the people who are really struggling to find, call it your microfunding. What happens if you collaborate with your neighbor? What happens if you collaborate with someone else who has an idea that's similar to yours? All of a sudden, the ability for you to have faster impact at scale is significant, because there's probably also the reason why things are the way that they are. We need to move quite quickly, and we also need to be able to have noticeable impact, given the speed at which the pandemic is moving.
There's a question here from one of the fellows, and they say, do you recommend Allan Gray fellows interested in raising funds for COVID response apply directly through the usual E² process or through the E² Innovation and Response Fund, or both?
So we would see that all engagement with fellows as part of the underlying mandate of E². So they should respond, apply directly to E². The whole intention of this particular IRF fund is something over and above what would be more normal business for E², something that's in the national interest and supporting entrepreneurs outside of the net of existing fellows. But we certainly encourage fellows to apply, but they can do it directly as opposed to through the fund.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so fellows do have more options, but this fund is open to any South African business that has a great innovation or response to COVID. Just in closing, I want to just kind of make sure that we bring everything and summarize it. Again, the 4 focus areas is on prevention. Prevention is really anything that will prevent the spread of the disease by supporting measures to lower infection rates. Mohammed, thank you for this. I'm reading from the chat, by the way. So detection, to detect and understand the magnitude of the disease. That would be testing equipment, like in the case of Cape Bio, that's doing some magnificent work. Care, provide medical care or other care for people. So that patient beds, health profession tools, PPE, and other support. Support to those whose lives have been disrupted by the pandemic. And that could be safe food delivery solutions and others. Those are the key focus areas, and we want to encourage you, small businesses, social entrepreneurs out there with great innovations, and especially during a time of crisis, it's a great time for innovation to come to the fore, to respond. Thank you so much, Anthony and Zipo, for joining us today and unpacking this. Our aim as Entrepreneurship to the Point is to ensure that we are informing, equipping, and inspiring entrepreneurs across the borders of that's impacted during this time, and really getting to the point of making sure that they get the necessary assistance. Yeah. Thank you so much. Please join us on our YouTube channel, Entrepreneurship to the Point, Entrepreneurship to the Point, and all other social media channels, and also E to the Point on Twitter. I'm Sean Tiernison, and thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you.